What's up, everybody? My name is Galson Anthony, the best to ever do it. And another podcast where I bring somebody particularly interesting. That's always my opening line. This time around, I got somebody who's kind of controversial, fighting for minority rights. That word is a buzzword. He is known to be the ex-deputy CEO of AfriForum and now in the Solidarity Movement. His name is Ernst Roets. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Crazy thing is I haven't seen you for 22 years.
Yes.
I think we need to give people context. Why have I not seen you for 22 years?
Yeah.
Right? We actually went to the same high school together.
Yep.
This high school for me was quite interesting because that's when I got to encounter Afrikaans people for the first time. And not 22 years later, like probably 12, 13 years later, I'm like, hey, you went to politics. That was a surprise to me.
Yes.
Run me through that. Like,
let me first say, for the sake of the viewers, what I said to you when I saw you today, that is that you still look the same.
I still look the same.
That's a compliment.
Yeah, thank you.
You look like you did in high school. So that's really good to see you. And
good to see you too.
you know, it's a great thing in this era of social media is you can stay in touch with people, even if you haven't seen them in a while. But also, I actually just said that to someone yesterday, that I think it's true for most people, but it's certainly true for me, that as you grow older, a lot of people tend to look back at their childhood as something very idyllic. And some people don't because of whatever reasons. But for me, I really long back to that time, or I really think about it as a sort of the perfect time in my life.
Man, I mean, being young, I could pay to be young again. No responsibility.
Yeah.
Complain about trivial things and just live life.
Yeah. Complain about high school.
Yeah. Let's talk about high school a little bit. What's crazy is that in high school, we didn't know each other like that, although we're in the same classrooms.
Yes.
Yeah. And speaking about classroom, how's your mom doing?
Oh, she's doing well. My mom's doing very well. Yeah, she was a teacher.
She was an accounting teacher, right?
No, she several subjects, primarily biology. But I think in our time, I think we got science from her. Yeah.
And speaking of school, because I wanted to actually speak about, how racist you are, right? So before we get there, let's take it in the context of school, because also with me, I'm trying to digest some of the things. When we look at high school, there were two particular teachers, right? One was Foster. What was his name?
Piet Foster.
And the second one was Jacobs. I believe he recently passed away.
Yes.
They were known to be racist by the black folks, right? And sorry for using this language. It's like I always disagreed because they were dicks to everybody. They were just dicks to everybody.
So they were very strict.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting to hear you say that, because I didn't have that perspective. Maybe because I was white. I don't know. I'm white.
But what perspective didn't you have?
No, that they were racist. It just never crossed my mind.
Gotcha. We have those times where teachers are called racist for doing that. Or how do you feel about that? Because I feel it is affecting the education landscape altogether. What's your take?
On teachers being accused of racism. Look, racism is a real thing. And it's something that should be combated. I am concerned, however, that it's very easy to accuse someone of racism. And so racism is a really, really horrible thing.
I want to accuse you for being racist.
Well, you could throw your best at me and
here's the
respond.
Thing. And I'm sorry, I already actually just cut your question, but your answer, but I wanted to get to it. It's like you basically support minority rights of Afrikaans people. That's already a problem. Isn't that already like outright racist? It's like being an activist for Afrikaans people.
Well, I might play devil's advocate and say, but do you think then Afrikaans people should not have rights? Maybe you should explain to me why that is a problem, and then I can respond.
Well, let's look at the context of what Afrikaans people are in the country, right? So Afrikaans people generally are very staunch. They've got they're known to have a certain attitude of behavior, culture, which basically majority of the people are against. So that has been branded as being racist, right? Because it's culturally not accepted.
You mean not acceptable in terms of sort of going upstream or going against what the majority wants?
Basically that, right?
Okay.
Amongst a lot of things, also history. I know everybody's favorite word is apartheid, right? but given that context, that word racism fits well with you.
Yes.
With when I say you, I mean everyone who else is Afrikaans. How are you not racist based on that?
So I can link this to what I was about to say. I think racism is racism really exists, and it really is a grotesque thing. I am concerned, however, that in the day and age in which we live today, it's very easy to accuse people of racism. Oftentimes, and we see this in the news all the time, if I can come with a bit of a turn and then I'll get to your answer, where people get accused of racism all the time. And sometimes there's an incident between, let's say you and I have a disagreement about something, and it ends up in a fist fight or something, or I stab you or you stab me or whatever, something happens and there's an incident. It might just be because we had a disagreement. It might not necessarily be because of racism. But unfortunately, whenever there's a disagreement and the people are different races, the default conclusion tends to be racism. And racism is a problem, and I think it's easy to falsely accuse people of racism.
So if I punch you in the face now, I'm not racist, but if you punch me in the face, you're racist.
I think there's some truth in that. I think white people get accused of racism much easier than black people.
The context here is basically saying when two people are fighting, right? And a black person attacks white person, I don't know if it will make the news, but if you touch me in any form, hell, you could say, I don't like your shirt. It's too this. You just might be racist. How do you feel about that? And I need like a very detailed how you feel about it, and not a political version of it, like a political correct. How do you feel about that?
I want to give you two different answers, but both of them are true. Mm-hmm. The first is that it really saddens me and it angers me at the same time, because it's not true. There are some cases where it's true, but I mean, if it's leveled against me, so it's really what would be the word? It's really destructive to discourse, because it's like calling someone a rapist or something. I mean, what can be worse than racism? And the moment that bomb is dropped, it sort of destroys the conversation. Mm. But then on the other hand, the second part of my answer, which contradicts the first, is I've almost gotten to the point where I don't care. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a bad place to be in. And the reason why I say I don't care is because I think that word is used so often. And now I think people have gone past racism. Now it's Nazism. Now everyone's a Nazi all of a sudden.
Right.
So I think it's sad because racism is real and it needs to be combated. But I think it's almost like a currency, like the value of a currency. Like, you know, if you run out of money, you just print new money, and eventually what happens is the value of the currency declines. And it's like, I think that's happening with the word racism. It's an important word, but if it's used, and it's a very important concept, important in the sense that we should be cautious of this. But if the accusation is used too much, and when it's too often used falsely, the word loses its value, mm-hmm. and then people just don't care about it anymore.
So you known more in the context of AfriForum mm-hmm. for the longest time. So let's just use that context for a while. So would you say that AfriForum is anti-racist?
Absolutely.
So why you keep being accused for being racist?
Can I give you an example?
I need more of a straight answer.
I think we are being accused for being racist because I think a lot of people don't understand that there's a difference between democracy and majoritarianism. Mm-hmm. I don't think if the majority decides something, that's not by definition democratic. But that's a political answer. I think a more personal answer would be to the question, why are we? Just frame the question again. I want to make sure I answer correctly. So if we're against racism, why are we accused of racism?
Correct. And considering you saying minority rights as well in the same sentence,
I think it's used as a slur to silence people. Mm-hmm. And if you look at AfriForum, everything that AfriForum does is defensive. Mm-hmm. It's in response to people chanting, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. It's in response to government politicians saying, we're coming to take your land. It's in response to people falsely accusing people of racism and so forth. So it's a defensive approach. And so what concerns me is that when people try to defend themselves against racism, they get accused of being
racism. Now, given that, can a black person become CEO of AfriForum?
Well, let me firstly say I was with AfriForum. I'm not with AfriForum anymore. Right. So I don't want to answer that question as if I'm the spokesperson for AfriForum.
Okay, but give an answer as if you were still there.
Yeah, I think the answer is theoretically yes. Mm-hmm. But part of...
What about practically? So theoretically, yes, but practically?
practically, I don't foresee that happening.
Mhm.
And the reason is because AfriForum makes it the mission or the vision statement of AfriForum is to ensure that there is a future for the Afrikaner people to live sustainably.
But that
in the
don't make you
southern tip of
racist,
Africa.
Ernst, because here's why. Say, for example, I decide, look, guys, I think I'm for AfriForum and everything stands for, but I want to be CEO. And I'm Black and I want to preserve Afrikaans people. So why can't I be that from a theoretical and pragmatical sense?
No. The point is, so we can go to the question, when are you an Afrikaner? And that's a big debate. We can have that discussion. But I don't foresee that happening, but it's possible that it could happen.
That hot seat is very important for me to put you on. Is that, okay, you don't foresee it happening. Sounds like a political answer. But the factor with AfriForum means Afrikaans rights excludes Black people. Because the further question is, why is it that Afrikaans speaking colored people don't see AfriForum as their forum or their organization to look to?
But I think I want to say two things. One is the point about exclusion, and the other one is the point about colored people. I don't think the way to think about AfriForum is that it is an attempt at exclusion, but rather that it is an attempt at inclusion. And the reason why inclusion of the Afrikaner people. And why I say that is, look, for example, at public universities in South Africa. Afrikaans has gradually been taken out as medium of instruction. I don't think there's a public university left in South Africa where you can really study in Afrikaans. There might be some exceptions here and there, but University of Pretoria, Afrikaans was taken away. Stellenbosch taken away. University of the Free State taken away. UNISA, Potchefstroom, all the big, what they call Johannesburg, Rau, which used to be Rau, now it's University of Johannesburg. All of them were Afrikaans, and you could study in Afrikaans. Eventually it became double medium, and eventually there's no Afrikaans. So the point is, you can't study in Afrikaans. And so to come and say that we need to give the opportunity for people who want to study in Afrikaans to do so, and if we can't do that in public spaces, we're going to build a private university. I'm using this as an example, where they can study that. Then that's not exclusion, that's inclusion, because they have been excluded and we're trying to bring them back in. So I think that I would say,
so if I understand it correctly, Afrikaans is being excluded in so many forms and ways, right? So the language Afrikaans was an oppressive language. I'm putting this in inverted commas.
Sure.
Right. Now it's been removed from the universities, and it's like, you know what? Let's go build our own university so we can have Afrikaans people in. Say this happens. Could Black people go to it?
Yeah, if they study in Afrikaans. I don't think it would at all be appropriate to say this is for white Afrikaans people, and if you don't comply, you can't study here. That would definitely be inappropriate and would not be acceptable.
What makes me uneasy here is that it's pro-Afrikaans does mean that, okay, Black folks, yeah, you can come if you want. It doesn't sound like pro-Afrikaans, but Black people, any day you're welcome.
I think there's an underlying issue here. Is firstly, this is something that I've noticed that bothers me as an Afrikaner, is that Afrikaners tend to think of identity in terms of culture and not in terms of race. I know a lot of people would disagree with that, but so if you ask me what am I will not say I'm a white South African. I will say I'm an Afrikaner. And so, but a lot of Black South Africans, not all, but a lot, it seems to me, define themselves as Black. In other words, not necessarily as, in terms of a cultural identity, Zulu or Sepedi or whatever. And I think this often leads to some form of friction. I know there are many cultural, traditional communities in South Africa, Black cultural communities, who are concerned about their culture, about their way of life, about them not getting recognition for their culture and tribal identity and so forth. But the reason why I mention this is I'm absolutely convinced that it's not just normal, but it's natural, and it's a good thing for people to want to preserve their culture.
I disagree in the factor that Black folks or the Black folks in South Africa see themselves as Black as opposed to the culture. I'll give you one group. The Zulus.
Yeah.
They're a very dominant nation. I've never heard the Sutus call themselves nations. I've never heard Tswana, Tongas, Vendas call themselves nation. The only people that call themselves a nation is the Zulu people, from what I understand. I could be wrong. but I've never heard that with anybody else. Now, the Afrikaans people tend to do the same. These two are exactly the same people. Afrikaans people and Zulu people, same.
There are a lot of similarities.
If I could remove the accent and the physical color with them, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference because they got the same attitude. They have the exact same attitude, right?
That's really interesting.
They both
Which is ironic because there was historically some big wars between the
Correct.
and the Zulus.
And I wanted to get to the next point. Is like the similarities is like the dominance. Like Afrikaans people are dominant. Zulu people are very dominant. Afrikaans people generally don't want to marry outside Afrikaans. Guess who don't want to do that? Zulus. They stay within Zulus. They don't want to speak the other languages. They want to speak Zulu. Hell, they would marry a Zulu girl even if they love a Tswana girl, just so they don't have to speak Tswana. That's how deep it is. Afrikaans people have the same thing. And these people are so much the same that they cannot coexist with each other. Now, look, I've seen South Africa map-wise. You go to Pretoria, predominantly Afrikaans.
Yep.
You barely hear Zulu. 30 kilometers or 40 kilometers south of the country, you have Johannesburg. You have Zulu people. Afrikaans speakers are far less.
Yep.
Go to KwaZulu-Natal. You go to Durban. The white folks there that are Afrikaans speak English. They'd rather talk English, just because the Zulu people dominate. In places like the Free State, where there's a lot of Afrikaans, you have almost no Zulu. So these people can't coexist with each other. And I believe it's because of their dominance or their similarity qualities. What do you think?
I agree partly. I don't think the can't coexist thing part I agree with. It depends on how you define coexist, because it seems to me as if the underlying argument to what you're saying is that the idea of people living together within the context of their communities is a bad thing.
No. White people, Afrikaans people, let me be specific. Afrikaans people are accused for being racist for the same reason we see Zulu people being the same thing. They just happen to be black in this instant. But these two people are so similar, you cannot put them in the same area together, like overwhelmingly together. Where there's a high level of Afrikaans, is a very low level of Zulu, and vice versa.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the reason. I think, yes, you might. It's interesting to point out the similarities. I think if the undertone or the point is to put them together so that they can assimilate, that would lead to friction. But not that if you put them together, they're going to fight or something. Historically, there have been friction, but there have also been many examples historically of Afrikaners and Zulus working together with King Mpande, King Bini Zulu, and then many others. So I think the issue here is coexisting on a basis of mutual recognition and respect, saying we have a culture, you have a culture, we can appreciate each other's cultures. And so the Zulu people, for example, the Afrikaners have our approach to economics is to put a very strong emphasis on free markets and on individual property rights. Zulu people tend to have a stronger emphasis on communal ownership, like the king owns the land and so forth. Now, I can say that's wrong. It's not necessarily wrong. It's a cultural preference. And I think in as far as, and I think that's where racism comes in, and especially this sort of enlightenment racism and paternalism, is a white guy comes and says, you guys are doing it wrong. You need to change your culture. You need to be like us. That's racism, and it's paternalism. I think coexistence can.
I don't think it's racism, first and foremost. If I want you to be like me, doesn't mean that I don't like you because of your race. It just means that I disagree with you and I think my way is better. So that's more a superiority complex, and black people have it with each other, and even Afrikaans and white people have it with each other. But moving on to other stuff like white privilege. How white privileged are you?
That is a very good question, and I have I think a very important answer. I think, let me answer it controversially for the sake of the podcast. I think privilege is a good thing. And I think privilege is something that it's good to want to have privilege. I can certainly not argue with the fact that white people have been given privileges in the past. I will never argue with that. I do think if you ask me about, I cannot say to you with a straight face that I don't have privilege. But the privileges I think I have is not, I don't think it's first and foremost because I'm white. I think it's because of the type of support that I'm getting from my parents up until today. And that's not necessarily a white or black thing. I mean, we can talk about family.
I got that privilege. That doesn't sound like white privilege to me. So what are your white privileges? And I mean, I don't think you can, if you are able to say, okay, my white privilege is A, B, C.
So the question is, what are my white privileges? I don't know. I can think of a lot of ways in which I'm being disadvantaged because of the fact that I'm white.
But the thing is, that's having the victim mentality. And I hate it when Black folks do that, right? So everybody sees themselves in the victim mentality here. And that's not
victim,
what I'm
victim.
Because you know what's so beautiful about me being Black? I'm athletic. I age well. Right? Like,
you do age well.
Right. So that's my privilege for being Black. It gives me longevity in the business area. It gives me longevity in so many places. That's my Black privilege. As far as government privileges are concerned, now that there's things where Black people are ranked first, hey man, I'm first in line. That's my Black privilege. Am I mad at it? No, of course not. It's privilege. It's my privilege to have, right? And now the question becomes, your white privileges, what are they?
I can answer the question if I can frame it slightly different, and that I can answer with more.
That's cheating.
Yeah, and it might be different. That's because I'm not sure how to answer the question on white privilege. I can say Afrikaner privilege, and the reason why is white is a race, Afrikaner is a culture. So I do think that I have certain privileges as a result of being part of a particular cultural community.
Okay.
And I do think that other cultural communities have other privileges. And I can give you an example of a privilege that I don't have. I was
don't want that answer.
let me just, I'll give you the short version just of this. I was at a conversation. I was in a conversation recently with some Jewish organizations, and representatives of the Jewish community. And I was really, and I know there's this stereotype of, the Jews always want to make money. But I have to say, I was really struck by how instinctively they were able to, when we talk about a particular issue, to think about how are we going to make this profitable. And I actually think that's a privilege. It's a cultural privilege. I think it's something that a lot of Jewish people instinctively think of, and it's easier for them than for me. And I think a privilege that I have from a cultural perspective is I think Afrikaner people tend to be hardworking people. I think
that's more a trait, not a privilege.
Yes, but I think you could describe it as a privilege in terms of being born in a community where this type of thing is encouraged.
So let me answer it like this, right? So here's the rhetoric. So Afrikaans people are privileged because of the apartheid system, and then you guys inherited. How do you feel about that statement?
Yeah, I don't think that's fair, because it's 2025 now. I was alive during apartheid. But I can't remember. I don't have a single political memory. And my memories of the time was being a toddler, playing with Ninja Turtles and watching some story on TV, watching Garfield. That's what I remember from those days.
I feel like you're running away from that question. But however, let's go on to a lighter note. I want to give you some drinks.
Thank you.
This is a liqueur.
So what is this? Yes, it smells very, very good. I have to say.
Thank you. It's a liqueur that is made out of natural products, honey and blueberries. So I wanted you to try it and give me like a overview of what you think.
Well, firstly, it's delicious. It's really, really good. It's also quite thick, but smooth. It's almost like, I don't want to say syrup, but it's like, there's some texture in it, which I think is great.
I think that comes from the honey.
Yeah, it must be the honey, and you can taste the honey. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's a type of thing that would certainly make you drunk because you wouldn't know where to.
Yeah, it sneaks up on you. It does.
Yeah. It's really good. I think this would be good just like this, but also be good with ice. If it's like a hot day, you can drink it with ice.
Speaking of ice, let's get some ice in it.
Yeah.
I didn't bring a spoon, so
no,
I'll
sure.
just grab it by hand.
I'll just break those.
Take the ones inside.
Yeah.
So would you drink this like at home alone?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Now we have a white monopoly capital investing in it.
I like having a shot of whiskey. I'm actually not a big drinker. Like at social events, I'm usually the guy that drinks the least. But I love.
You mentioned that, like, to me, it's like, I don't drink much, but
yeah, it's not a principle thing. It's just I'm the guy that goes to a bar and buys a Coke. and then everyone makes fun of me. But
not Afrikaans enough, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, take your Afrikaans card away from you.
But I like when I'm at home at night working, maybe having a shot of whiskey. But I will certainly enjoy this. No, it's very good. It really is.
I'm glad you like it. And now let's get back to the serious stuff. What the hell happened in Belgium?
What happened in Belgium?
Yeah, because now in Belgium, we know that
sounds like a movie.
What happened? Like, I really want to know what happened in Belgium, because now you guys were having a conference, right? And this conference was people that were discussing ideas that was
conservatives,
pretty much similar to each other, conservatives. And then from your video, you said a bunch of left-wing liberals try to break you guys up. That was your suspicion. That was not something you said. That's the absolute thing happened. So the Belgian people, the Belgians are the ones that try to break that whole situation up. Is that the situation? Don't you think they even thought you guys were racist?
They might have. I think they thought that.
So, I mean, they're white.
Yeah. That was. It was a civilizational issue. I think it was white people within the West who are fundamentally opposed to the West, or the idea of being Western. I call them oikophobes. It's people who hate their own. Like oiko, I think, is an old Greek word meaning home, and a phobe, of course, is if you don't hate something. So if you hate your own home, you're an oikophobe.
So there you have it, guys. See, it's not only black people that hate their own.
No,
this is everywhere.
I think the problem of hating your own, my perspective is, it's a much bigger problem among white people, a lot of white people, especially in Europe, and especially in.
I lived in Europe, so I know.
Okay. Yeah. So the conference was the National Conservatism Conference that we attended in Brussels, in Belgium. And it was attended by pretty high-profile people, like several prime ministers, famous journalists, authors, academics, politicians, people from all walks of life, and people from all over the world. I mean, I was there with a colleague. And then the mayor so Brussels is complicated because it's a city. It's sort of the capital of Europe, because that's where the European Union is based. So this mayor of this particular section, it's not the mayor of Brussels, but I think he publicly announced it on X, on Twitter. He said, there's no place for ideas like these to be tolerated in our city. I'm recalling this from memory, but this is more or less what he said, that I did call the police. I gave instructions for the conference to be disbanded. We're not going to tolerate, I'm not sure if he used the word racist, but he said something along like right-wing extremists or something. And so we were in the conference, and the guy who was speaking was Nigel Farage, who was the guy who pushed this whole Brexit thing with England leaving the European Union. He was sort of Mr. Brexit. He's been campaigning for England to leave the European Union, and he was busy speaking. And suddenly there was a bunch of police officers just coming into the conference, and they were sent by the government, the local government, to disband the conference. And they didn't succeed because I think a lot of people just said, well, we're just going to stay here. And so they had this weird thing where they said, I think they called it a slow shutdown. So they stopped the catering. They said, there's not going to be any water, any food at this conference. We're stopping everything. So you guys are going to starve in here. And if you want to eat or you want to drink something, you have to leave.
Don't they know Uber Eats?
Yeah. But food was not allowed in. So the police were blocking.
Food wasn't allowed in also.
The police was blocking the entrance. And they said, once you leave, you can't go back in.
Gotcha.
So they didn't chase us out. So they called it a slow shutdown, which was quite interesting. And I think it backfired on them because the conference first, they call it the Barbara Streisand effect. Was Barbara Streisand, the Streisand effect shortly is this famous actress. Someone took a picture of her home and put it on some website, but it didn't say that it was her home. It was just a picture of a beach. And one of the houses was her home. And then she took him to court for publishing a picture of her house. Nobody knew that it was her house
until she
took him to court. So the Streisand effect is when you try to prevent something from happening and then actually you strengthen it. You amplify the message. And that's, I think, what happened there.
Given that, you're saying, because you guys sound proud of yourself as a group, that it finally did happen and it did go through, and, despite the challenges and all. Let's take the key at hand from the left side.
Okay.
You guys are racist, trying to have like some sort of Nazism to talk about how all the right-wing extremists are going to come together and they're going to get rid of the left wings and we're going to stand here and become one. If they think you're racist as white people, do you not consider that you're right-wing?
No, I think Well, firstly, the Nazi thing was, I think someone said, this is just a Nazi conference, which was ironic because the chairperson of the conference was actually a Jew. But I think, so the Jew is now a Nazi. But I think the Western world has, in other words, especially Europe and America, has a very serious problem of guilt and not knowing how to deal with it. And for many reasons, there's validity in the guilt, because a lot of horrible things happened. And one of them being the Holocaust, the worst example, the Nazis, the worst thing that you can think of. And I think a problem that in the Western world, or to put it more bluntly, that a lot of white people have, they have this very deep sense of guilt, but they don't know how to deal with it. And I think the wrong way to deal with it is to say that you are wrong for being who you are, and you are wrong for trying to preserve your culture. So the wrong way of dealing with that is to think that the solution is to dissolve. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have that attitude. And so guilt, in some cases, there's some validity in it. In some cases, it's not. In some cases, it's exaggerated.
Do you believe that you should take your ancestors' guilt or wrong? So my dad punches your dad in the face. And then you and I happen to go to the same school.
Yeah.
Am I guilty for what he did to you?
I have a bit of a nuanced answer to that, because I don't think I think it's oversimplified to say, no, it's irrelevant. The reason why is because I think family identity is important. Family identity matters, and cultural identity. People have multiple identities. So I am a part of the Roets family, for example. Right. And I think it has always been the case throughout history where families have had feuds. I think there's some validity in having strong opinions about something because your ancestors had those strong opinions or something. So
I feel like you're going off the answer. The question was, do you believe that your ancestors' wrongdoings?
Well, the typical liberal answer is no, because we're all individuals and we're all responsible for ourselves. But I am what you might call a communitarian. So I believe in communal identity. I'm not a individualist saying that I'm just myself as an individual. I think I am given meaning, and I'm given identity, and I'm given fulfillment through my identity that I didn't choose. And so the short answer is no. I don't have to defend something my great grandfather.
So and I keep bringing this up, and I know we've just passed that discussion. So because of apartheid that has happened to Black folks, land without expropriation or reparations in the context of the Americans, you don't believe that should happen?
No. So that's a good example. So my view is, if my great grandfather participated in some atrocious deed during the apartheid system, during the apartheid times, let's say he chased someone off their land, he took the land for himself. The typical liberal answer is that has nothing to do with me because I am my own individual. But I think if my great grandfather did that, I think I should feel guilty about that.
I'll give you an answer. I don't know. I don't think I'll be very popular about it. If my dad whips your dad in the face, kicks him so hard that he loses a hand, I'm not going to feel guilty. That man must go to jail. I love it. And my father's a great man.
So you're the liberal in this conversation.
Right. So I have a conservativeness and I've got liberal things about, certain things. I feel like, look, if my dad did the crime, he's got to do the time. I'm not going to do it for him. Right. And so forth, because I'm not going to allow my son to start paying sins for it. My father, he had his own ideas, maybe him and a couple of other people. Now, I understand there's nuances to it.
Yeah, sure.
But if you live in a world with extreme sense of nuance, you realize there's going to be no solving with problem.
Yeah. I think let's use that example. If my dad punched your dad in the face, or my grandfather punched or punching in the face is maybe not over 100 years down the line, it's not a big deal. But if my great-grandfather did something atrocious to your great-grandfather, I would feel that I have a sense of responsibility towards you. Because I think...
Let's get reparations.
Yeah.
Let's get reparations.
But I do think simply but that depends on what happened. And so I do think if we really make it practical, I think let's take the land issue in South Africa. There where it really actually happened, where there was a black community that was chased off by some white community or whatever, then there must be restitution for that.
Got it. So do you have any land you want to give over to me? Because I'm black and I need some land. Got to hand over some.
I don't have any land, unfortunately.
Damn it. I'm sure your grandparents or your parents got something to hand over to me.
No, not really. I maybe a house here and there, but
look, I think my point I'm trying to make here, it's a slippery slope. And it's a hard one to stop.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where I wanted to get to the point of the United States, right? When Trump said he's not giving South Africa any money anymore because of that whole situation. Now, I'm not going to speak about that part specifically because, again, slippery slope. And this is something more recent. It will be more relevant for this discussion. But I wanted to ask you, now that has happened, right? And I know Elon is probably a part of it. And I know a lot of Afrikaans South Africans are mad at Elon and he's mad at them back. 400 million of US aid is not coming to South Africa, which has helped people with tuberculosis, helped people with HIV, has helped. How do you feel about that now?
I from what I've read, they've said that they would not stop aid that goes towards health issues, like if it's towards saving people, providing medical care, they would not stop that. I think the situation is very unfortunate that we are in, and I think what bothers me about this situation is we are in this situation largely because of what the South African government has been doing over the last few decades. And now there's this reaction from the United States, and now people are angry with the United States.
Do you think it's the United States or is just Elon and Trump?
I think I would answer slightly different. I would say if you walk down the street in the United States, in New York City or wherever, and you ask people, most people wouldn't even know that South Africa is a country.
Correct. So they just don't care.
Yes, but I think among people in the United States who are sort of politically aware, who are sort of more interested in politics, perhaps involved with government, but in some way sort of more involved with that political sphere, we have noticed a growing concern about South Africa and a growing interest in South Africa.
So you guys did snitch.
It was you guys that snitched to Trump. It was you.
That's it. Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches. So that's where it's like you said, a growing concern. And am I getting this concern because we have about 150,000 Afrikaans people in the United States? Is it them that told, or was it AfriForum or any association that you might be a part of that said, hey guys, South Africa has a problem?
I think we live in an era where you can't really hide these type of things because of social media, and so if Julius Malema chants "kill the boer, kill the farmer" and people put that on Twitter or on X, it has the potential to go viral, and it has the potential for some guy in America to see it and retweet it and respond to that, and so.
But some guy, not a large group of Americans, not even like 5% of Americans care. This is what I'm trying to say, is that generally Americans don't care. Americans care about America, and South Africa should care about South Africa. And the reason why I asked you that question was that 400 million that has been paused to come to South Africa. How do you feel about it?
So I think what's also important here is just to mention that it's up to the United States to decide how they're going to spend their own money. And it's not up to us to dictate how they should spend their money. And it's not up to us we don't have a right to demand or to dictate how the United States should spend their money. So if they want to stop spending money, it's their prerogative. And I think it's healthy for countries to look and nations to look after their own interests. But in as far as aid is given, I think it's important to do it in a way that does not reward corruption.
The American complaint, or Donald Trump's complaint, is we giving away a lot of free money to South Africa and Africa as a world. Now, Donald Trump is tired of that. Now, you say each country needs to take care of their own. If all aid, Bill Gates stops giving in money, the Clintons stop giving in money, USAID stop giving in money, how would South Africa take care of themselves? From your perspective, how you propose South Africa should take care of themselves?
I think we should firstly not be dependent on such monies coming in. And
Just imagine they cut it right now. Boom.
I don't think that is the solution. That's like, I don't think social grants are healthy. or a long-term solution at least. But I would certainly not want social grants to stop overnight, because that would lead to unrest and chaos.
But you more what's the word, conservative, right? And conservatives don't like social grants of any sort.
Yes.
But you're answering like someone who's a socialist now.
How so? Because I'm saying don't stop it immediately.
Don't stop it. It's like, okay, Afrikaans people and South Africa should have been self-sufficient. But you as an Afrikaans person, you're benefiting out of that same grant that the United States is giving, which is about a total of 8 billion, if I'm correct. I may be corrected, by the way. But now the social side of me kicks in. When I say,
yes,
what if they stop it today?
Well, I try not to be ideological. So I don't try to answer the question by consulting some ideology. Okay, what does this ideology say about this? I do think dependence is obviously the opposite of independence. And if a particular system or structure or policy has the result, even though they are good intentions, but if the consequences are that people become dependent on the government, then it's the antithesis to independence and self-sufficiency. And so you can have good intentions with bad consequences. And so therefore, I think if the question is what is the solution, it would be taking an approach that incentivizes self-reliance. So for example, if you get social grants, let's say you're unemployed, you get money from the government.
Right.
Now you get a job, you lose that money. So in a sense, there's not an incentive on you to start working, because if you start working, you stop getting money. It's very oversimplified. I know it's oversimplified, but we
actually don't feel like it's even clear enough, as far as the explanation is concerned. And I understand you didn't give it time to think about that, but these are some of the ideologies that I think most South Africans haven't thought about, irrespective of color. Right, both sides. But I wanted to shift that conversation to someplace else at a later stage. But let's start with farm killings. Now, you've been speaking a lot about farm killings. 2023 statistics says 50 farmers were killed. I think the year before is 40 something. Right now, if you take 50 people that died with farm killings, with 300 people injured as well, brutally injured, and we would divide that's like 4 people getting killed a month. Afrikaans people say, there's genocide. White people are being killed. But it's farm killings. Are there not black people involved? Are there not black farm owners that are being killed in the process? When AfriForum or any institution that is labeled as racist and have all that, are they also speaking for the black people that got killed as well?
Well, firstly, I think there are actually very few people who call it genocide. Even though those who are campaigning against it, including myself, I actually wrote a book about farm murders, are accused of saying that it's a genocide. So the funny thing is I wrote a book called Kill the Boer. It's a book about farm murders. And
Julius Malema.
Yeah.
Because you just wrote a book called Kill the Boer, and then Julius Malema used that word, and you took him to court because of that word.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between writing a book with a title about that topic and chanting the slogan from it.
I don't know, man. You got a book that stays forever, and chanting is a moment that people are going to talk about and forget about it.
That's a superficial argument.
All right,
I'm not staying on a stadium chanting. I'm not saying these guys are criminals and then kill the Boer and start making. I'm saying here's a book about this topic.
Oh, make no mistake. I'm not defending anybody. I'm just actually trying to challenge you.
So my point is, so in this book, I wrote a chapter about why this is not genocide. And then people say, oh, you wrote a book calling it genocide. You're saying that there's a genocide happening when I literally wrote an entire chapter explaining why it isn't.
So I've not read the book, so to be fair, right? But listen to the title. Kill the Boer. That is an action.
Yeah.
Genocide is something that already happened, right? Kill the Boer means it's to be done. Yes, that's the difference. It's actually a massive difference. It's like I say, a book called Shot versus a book saying shoot him. That's the difference between kill the Boer and genocide. I mean, I'm just giving you an example. So I'm like, okay, Ernst, you hated Julius Malema. You took him to court for that. Not hated him. You took him to court for that, but yet you call the book Kill the Boer. Don't you think that's a little bit?
No, because context matters.
Context matters, sure.
So this whole book is an argument against Kill the Boer. It's an argument for the protection of farmers, and chanting Kill the Boer from a political platform, kill the boer, kill the farmer, after making a speech about how these people are criminals and you should go out and invade their farms and so forth. It's in a complete different context. So I think having that title, the title says this is what the book is about.
Gotcha.
So I think it is a serious problem.
It's a serious problem. Why? Is it a problem because 50 people got killed, or is it because Afrikaners got killed, or is it farmers that got killed?
It's a serious problem for 4 reasons.
Yeah.
The one is the numbers. And when I say numbers, I mean, you have to consider, you can count how many people were killed and then how many farmers were killed, but then you also need to consider how many farmers are there.
I could tell you. So as far as that's concerned, if we look at the statistic, 50 farmers that got killed in 2024 actually make 0.2% of farmers all across the country.
0.2% of people in the country.
No, 50 farmers, that would make 0.00000000000.
No, they are.
But it's farmers.
There are between 30,000 and 35,000 commercial farmers in South Africa.
Great. So now let's take 50. 50 people in 30,000. That's 0.02%.
Well, the viewers can do the calculation. And
do the calculations. And I'm
only
only using that 30, 40,000 because he gave it to me. But that's not the official number out there. Go check the stats.
Yeah, sure. That's a debatable number, but that's the government number. That's what the Department of Agriculture says, how many commercial farmers there are.
But that number is, and I hate using the word insignificant, because one life is significant.
Yeah.
If anybody in the studio's life is gone, sure, it's 1 in 60 billion people. But if we look at it in context of numbers, farm killings is not really that much of a big thing, irrespective of a race. Why not protest for other crimes where white people are not so much involved?
Let's make it a bit more extreme example. You have 2 groups of people. One group is 1,000 people, and the other group is 10 people. Within the group of 1,000 people, 10 people are murdered. Within the group of 10 people, 3 people are murdered. Then you cannot say, oh, it's just 3. In the other group, 10 people were murdered. So because it's 3, it's not a big problem. Because the size of the group is very, very small compared to the...
1 second.
So it's certainly not the only problem in South Africa. It's certainly not the only community in South Africa that is targeted, and that experience larger than what you might call average numbers of levels of violence.
So if I have to say it in the way you're saying, is that, look, if we take the 30, 40,000 people and 50 people are dying a day, and these 50 people are very cornerstones of the economy, and you keep killing them, then that's a problem. So I'm for that. I'm 100% behind you with that. But now the question becomes, because Afrikaans people, AfriForum and any associated organization is pushing that because more white people are involved, more Afrikaans people are involved. Why don't you take that same energy and go find crimes where masses of people are dying and be an activist for that?
Well, there are a few, it's a bit more complex. So let me just give you the 4 reasons and then we can discuss it. So the one is the numbers. The second is the brutality, the levels of violence that you see during farm attacks. That is comparable to gang-related violence in South Africa, which is also a very serious problem. The third is the unique role that farmers are playing in terms of the economy, in terms of job creation. So you mentioned that now. And the fourth is the fact that farmers live in unique circumstances. They are far away from police stations. Oftentimes they don't have signal and so forth. And what that just means is you need to have some form of a unique counter strategy. If you say these people are being murdered, but they are on average 20 kilometers away from a police station as opposed to 2 kilometers, maybe we should think about how are we going to respond to that in a way that also covers them.
Is that what your book says?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll employ myself to read your book too.
Yeah.
Because the idea here was to challenge you as far as can, but there's some information I do not have. And I guess a lot of my viewers also don't have that.
Yeah.
So I play devil's advocate on both sides.
Sure.
And I have to make sure that, I challenge you as far as I can, as much as possible. But for the interest of time, the reason why I'm just going past this and going to the next one is our final point that I want to bring up. And Ernst, I don't know how well you know South Africa's political history. But do you think the AfriForum and all related institutions are descendants of the National Party or are descendants of the PFP, the Progressive Federal Party?
That's an interesting question. In some ways, I think it's neither. But if it has to be one of them, it would be more descendants of the PFP. It's not. The PFP was very liberal. The PFP was much smaller than the National Party. But the F in PFP is federalism.
Federal,
Yeah. And so what a lot of these institutions, such as AfriForum and others, are campaigning for is a more federal system.
So you want Gauteng to have its own policies, own system, own governor, own senator? Is that what you're looking to turn it into a state?
Not necessarily, but the system must be more decentralized. In other words, Gauteng and people living in Gauteng must have a bigger say in terms of what's happening in Gauteng, as opposed to some guy who lives in Cape Town making a law, deciding what's happening in Gauteng. So a better example, both you and I grew up in the north of South Africa.
No. I lived.
Okay, I lived in the north. South Africa is very big. I don't know how many kilometers Tanin is from Cape Town. It's like, I don't know,
1,700.
Something like that, yes. And so let's take the hypothetical situation of someone being born in Cape Town, growing up in Cape Town, becoming a politician, becoming a member of parliament, having Cape Town in the Western Cape as a frame of reference, and then writing laws applicable to the people who live in Zanin.
Gotcha.
It's without being in touch with those people. And so the way to minimize the negative consequences of that is to say the people of Tanin or Limpopo or the area, they must have a bigger say in terms of their own law. So a federal system is one in which there are national laws, but there are also more provinces and municipalities have a bigger sense of autonomy in terms of governing things according to the needs within their community. And also people living there have a bigger say in terms of how their tax money is spent.
Is that why Orania was built?
Again, I'm not a spokesperson for Orania, but partly as a reaction to this problem.
So I do understand how the federal state would work and why the people in certain places govern it. And I mean, if you look at the KwaZulu-Natal, to some degree that is happening. If you look at Orania, to some degree that is happening. And you have certain places. But it generally Cape Town, it's kind of happening, right? And they're trying to push Cape Town or the Western Cape to be a province of its own. And people have, their ways like, oh, this is apartheid just being, changed in a way or the other. But going back to the PFP versus the National Party, right? The National Party were hyper-conservatives. They were left right-wing extremists, right? And we could call it that way. And then the Federals, they were a little too left. What most people don't know is that up to 38% of white people in South Africa were against apartheid.
Yeah, well, eventually it was more. So towards the end, during the referendum, was it 69% or 59% who voted that negotiations should continue?
But I wanted to extend my question. So if that's 69, I'm going to use that number you're using. It's not a number I know of. I know 38%. And then eventually ANC, and I generally don't like to use the party names, but is they took over and won and trumped the National Party, and somehow the gradual change happened. And the PFP were forgotten about. If you say you're descendants of PFPs, and the reason why today they're irrelevant is because of how they wanted to do things. For example, they wanted a slow transformation as opposed to a radical transformation, right? And do you not think that AfriForum is the same, have the same problem because becoming irrelevant because you're not working with the black parties, so to put it, and you're working on your own?
AfriForum is very big. More than 300,000 members.
And that's quite small.
No.
As opposed to saying 9 million white people?
No, there aren't 9 million. There are 2.7 million Afrikaners.
Okay, Afrikaners, yeah.
But to be a member of AfriForum, you have to make a monthly contribution. So more than 300,000 people are giving AfriForum money every month. That's the biggest civil rights group in the Southern Hemisphere. And AfriForum does work with black parties, if you want to use that term, but more particularly traditional communities. So there are joint agricultural projects in Kandla, for example, and in Kungumati.
What are they doing for people in Kandla?
They are bringing commercial farmers who are members of AfriForum to the community to start joint agricultural projects. with the aim of providing them, in as far as this is what the community wants, training and experience in agriculture, and helping them turn their agricultural activities into something that is profitable.
Are you trying to make Black farm owners and Black millionaires? Is that what AfriForum is trying to do?
I would put it differently. I would say it's trying to help to empower traditional Black communities, African communities, or cultural communities.
How about you make Black millionaires? How about AfriForum works on making Black?
It's not AfriForum's job to make Black millionaires, not to make white millionaires.
Okay. So you're not making white millionaires at all?
No, it's about protecting civil rights and encouraging a society in which people live in mutual recognition and respect, and cooperating on issues on which we agree.
Would you tell me that Ernst Roets is not racist? He's just misunderstood.
If I have to choose between being racist and being misunderstood, I would say misunderstood is the term that I go with. But I think the reason
why... You have to convince me a lot more. Is Ernst Roets misunderstood, or is Ernst Roets racist?
I think I'm only misunderstood within certain small sections of society.
So would you have a little bit of racism in you? Like a little, somewhere there, somewhere?
No, if by racism you mean disliking people because of their race, no, certainly not. But I do have cultural, a sense of cultural identity. I do have a sense of pride in who I am. And I do believe that cooperation between cultural communities is important. So that's my approach. And I think that's healthy. And I think it's unfortunate that we live in a society where having a sense of pride in your cultural identity is regarded as racist. That I think is a problem.
What does it mean as an Afrikaner to be Afrikaans? Tell me. I am a person that knows nothing about being Afrikaans, and tell me proudly, what does it mean to be Afrikaans? And if it sounds racist to anybody, so be it.
To me, it means having a very rich history in South Africa and outside of South Africa, being part of Western civilization, but also having been in Africa for almost 400 years, and having fought several wars in Africa, some of which we lost, that were very tragic, some of which we won, some of it was fair, some of it was defensive, some of it was unjustifiable. But through that, having grown our own identity, developed our own language, and in cases where we were very downtrodden, such as after the Anglo-Boer War, with the scorched earth policies, the farms destroyed, the women and children in the concentration camps and so forth, we were able to rise up again and modernize. And even though the previous century in South Africa was very controversial for obvious reasons, still playing a very important and significant role in modernizing the country, providing infrastructure, whether that's highways, water, all of these things, developing the country, modernizing the country. And today having a sense of pride in who we are, looking back saying, oh, well, some things didn't go as well as it should have. Some things were unfortunate, or some things, should be corrected. But overall, being part of a community that has achieved a lot of things, and the most important of these things that I think we achieved was developing a very unique culture, including not just our language, which has become an academic language, Afrikaans, but also a very rich culture in terms of literacy, in terms of books being written in our language, poetry, songs, and so forth. And that's something I think to be proud of, and it's something that's worth trying to preserve.
So the way it sounds like, Afrikaans people are not leaving here to go to the United States. You're rejecting Trump's order.
Some would go. I think some would go. Mm-hmm. It was so that the statement about refugee status was the consequences thereof were some really fierce debates among people, because some people want to leave, but I think the majority won't go. And I think it's unfortunate to leave. It's not that simple to just go as a refugee. I think the point is we want a future here. We want a future here where you can maintain these things that I've just mentioned, but also where we can work with other communities, contribute and work together where we can. And when we disagree, we just give each other our own space and not try to be paternalistic and prescribe to others how they should do things.
So final set of questions. will you ever forgive the English people for what they did to you? And what is your beef? Is that beef going to ever end?
I think the beef has ended. I think this might be controversial. A lot of Afrikaans people wouldn't like hearing this. I have said this before. I think the Afrikaner people are culturally much closer to the English or the British than to the Dutch. England and London, not counting the politics, just looking at the people, are more similar to the Afrikaner people than the Dutch are.
Mhm.
And I think it's because culturally we've had this joint history where we've been in each other's space for so long that we just grew closer to each other. So I think the Afrikaner people the English have had a very important influence in Afrikaner culture. Almost all Afrikaans people have English ancestors somewhere. I don't think it's a question of forgiveness. I think it's a question of remembering what happened and dealing with that. And trying to work together and trying to work together where we can, and where we have issues in which we agree, we work together. But I don't think Afrikaners carry, we teach our children about the Anglo-Boer War, but we don't carry resentment towards the English. It's not as if we want to, take up arms and fight the English.
Right.
It's perfectly natural for Afrikaans people and English people to be friends and ride together and so forth.
The only reason why I'd agree with Afrikaans and the English people are closer to the English heritage to some degree or to a large degree is because the English people can go back to England, and Afrikaans people can actually have access closer to England than they can to Netherlands, because the Netherlands people do not like the Afrikaans people at all.
Yes.
And that's information that most people don't.
Yes, you're right. And it's very sad because, we do have Dutch ancestors in a certain sense.
But they deny.
Yeah, so the Dutch, there are some more on the conservative side. There are Dutch people with whom we are good friends. But overall, the Dutch people the Afrikaner people feel sort of abandoned by the Dutch.
Right.
So this thing that we go back to Holland, some of the Netherlands is one of the, I think, the top 6 countries to which Afrikaners immigrate and they leave. But I think it's number 6 on the list. The other 5 are all English countries.
Right.
USA, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. All of them are English countries.
Yeah, when I travel, I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of Afrikaans people. You can hear them from a mile away.
Yeah, you can hear them and you can see them and you hear the accent. Yeah, definitely.
Well, on that high note, let's end this. Thank you so much, Ernst, for coming after 22 years of seeing you.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can have a part 2, and there'll be a lot that I would like to discuss.
Sure.
Like, for example, the Afrikaans ancestry, where they're actually from, and the histories from the 1400s, 1600s, and even now, and even the Boer Wars, the Anglo-Boer Wars has been fought. I'd like to cover that another day. And there's quite a few people that I'd like to speak to that are associated with you. Like on your podcast, please do subscribe to these podcasts and subscribe to mine first before you subscribe to his. As well as gentlemen like Rob Hertzhoff.
Yep.
I'd love to sit down and speak to him.
Yeah.
You got his number, give him a call. Tell him Galveston Anthony wants to have a conversation.
Yeah, I'll put you guys in touch.
Tell him that Galveston Anthony's going to ask him all the questions that need to be asked.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy our discussions. And let's do this again in a couple of months.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for reaching out. And it's a great privilege. Thank you for inviting me, for the drinks, for everything. It's fantastic.
You didn't have a biltong.
Well, I'll have some now.
Not an Afrikaans person. No Brother Vane, no biltong. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.